Hi, this is Dr. Sean Lynch. I'm the co-founder and the co-president of Better Elections Now. And this is the first presentation in a planned series of presentations on the reforms we need in the United States. And this presentation is on proportional voting. This is a Better Elections Now educational presentation. You can find us on the web, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And please feel free to share this video with anyone that you'd like. I will post the link to the Google Slides presentation that I'm using in the description on our YouTube channel. So please also feel free to share that as well. I am a lecturer in social sciences. I got my PhD from Boston College, and my dissertation was on issues of free speech in times of crisis. And I founded Better Elections Now in 2016 as a result of the election of Donald Trump in an effort to lobby the presidential electors to choose someone other than Clinton and Trump. And of course, that failed. But in 2020, Better Elections Now is a voter rights education organization. And I'm going to be doing lots of recordings. And so in this series, this is the first one on proportional voting. The reality that we face is the United States needs major systemic reform. We have a lot of problems, and I will touch on a few of them in this presentation. I want to stay focused on voting, but we need major reform. Our Constitution has failed, and we're going to have to really all work hard as good citizens to build something better. So in this series, I'm going to talk about lots of different things we can reform, but for today, I'm going to talk about voting. So there are two types of ballots. There are two types of voting systems. The first is called first past the post, and the second is called proportional. The United States and the United Kingdom, by and large, use first past the post. Most other countries that are parliamentary democracies use proportional voting. So let's talk about what goes on in the United States. In all federal and most state elections, with some local exceptions, we use a method called first past the post. And what that means is that in an election, the person with the most number of votes wins, even if that person did not win more than 50% of the vote. So if there are more than two candidates, you end up winning by what's called a plurality rather than a majority. And that plurality can be as low as 34% of the vote. So first past the post voting is not proportional voting. And is therefore dysfunctional to my mind as a historian and a social scientist. So our Congress, the legislative branch of the United States, is divided into two houses. The lower house, the House of Representatives, has 435 members. This is an arbitrary number chosen in the 1920s. And for a nation with a population of 330 million people, 435 people in the lower house is simply not enough. I believe the number should be raised to 1,200. But for the moment, these 435 members are elected from what we call single member districts using first past the post voting. So each congressional district or constituency elects only one person, and that person is elected by first past the post. There are 100 members of the US Senate. The US Senate is also very out of balance and really needs major reform. However, every state elects two senators despite their size. And these are elected what's called at large or statewide. And they are also elected using first past the post. Now, our lower house elections for the House of Representatives have been distorted for decades by what's called gerrymandering. Both parties have engaged in gerrymandering, but since 2010, it is the purview of the Republican Party. And the reality of the period that we live in, you and I, is that the Republican Party only wins when they cheat. And they've become very, very good at cheating. I don't understand why no one has stopped them. This makes no sense to me. And it should stop, and it must be stopped. So one of the ways in which parties can cheat, but the Republican Party is cheating, is gerrymandering. And this is a way in which you model the congressional districts in such a way that it favors one party or another. Here's a graph. And what I would suggest that you do right now is pause the video for a moment and just read what I've written about what gerrymandering does and why it distorts our system. And I'll pause for a minute before I go on. So pause the video, take a look at the chart, and then hit play when you're ready. Okay, welcome back. So there's a right-wing organization called ALEC that organized the takeover of many state legislatures by the Republican Party in 2010, which happens in the wake, or that was the year of the last census before the census this year. And they have used this to cheat and to ensure minority rule. So gerrymandering must be stopped. Is there voter fraud in the United States? Absolutely, there is not. There is no voter fraud in the United States, full stop. A 2-second Google search will confirm that for you. There is, however, election fraud. Elections are being stolen every cycle by the Republican Party. As I said just a moment ago, one way is gerrymandering. The other way is voter ID laws. So voter ID laws are suppressing the vote of African Americans, the Latino community, college students, and the poor. Because Republicans only win when they cheat. They don't have a platform that appeals to the majority of people anymore. So rather than trying to win new voters, they try to prevent people from voting, and they've been very successful. Voter suppression laws most likely cost Hillary Clinton her election in 2016. So why this hasn't been changed, I don't understand. But it is something that is a major defect in our system, and it must be changed immediately. The President of the United States is indirectly elected by the voter. When the voter votes, they're choosing presidential electors who are pledged to a candidate. So the President of the United States is elected by the Electoral College. And this too, like the rest of our system, is extremely dysfunctional. The Constitution awards each state, no territories, only the states, a certain number of presidential electoral votes. The formula is simple. You add the number of members of the House of Representatives that state elects, which varies from 1 to 53. And you add to that the number of senators that they elect, which is always 2, and that gets the number of electoral votes. So for example, Texas elects 36 representatives and 2 senators, so they have 38 electoral votes. North Dakota, however, elects 1 representative and 2 senators, so they have 3. Here's the map showing the presidential electoral votes for each state. 48 of the 50 states award their electoral votes in a winner-take-all system. What that means is the winner of the statewide popular vote wins all of the electoral votes. This is not how it was done in the 19th century. Over time, it evolved into a winner-take-all system. Recently, Maine and Nebraska returned to a proportional system, which I think is superior. In those states, the winner of the statewide popular vote wins 2 electoral votes, the 2 accounted for by the senators. And then the winner of the popular vote in each of the congressional districts wins 1 electoral vote. I think that's superior because the winner-take-all system disenfranchises at least half of the population, or almost half of the population of a state. The Trump voter in Massachusetts or the Obama voter in Mississippi. That's wrong. It doesn't make sense to have a system where a large number of voters are disenfranchised when trying to elect the president. That just doesn't make sense. So we have an enormous number of problems to challenge and to fix. First past the post voting has resulted in minority rule along with gerrymandering. The Electoral College system disenfranchises a number of people. The other fundamental problem with the Electoral College is it gives too much power to the small states. The 26 smallest states, which account for 18% of the US population, control almost half the electoral votes needed to win the presidency. That's a dysfunction, and it's resulted in minority rule. And twice in the last 16 years, a Democrat won the presidency by the popular vote, but lost in the Electoral College. That's wrong. The system is returning bad results. Here's a map showing you that 18% of the US population controls almost half the electoral votes needed to win the presidency. So the system is very out of balance. Now, let's return for a moment, however, to this notion of first past the post. Let's look at the 1912 presidential election. That was somewhat unusual because there were 4 candidates. There was the sitting president, William Howard Taft, a Republican. There was the former Republican president, Teddy Roosevelt, now running as a progressive. You have the governor of New Jersey, the Democrat Woodrow Wilson, and the socialist Eugene Debs. So you can see here from these charts how the vote came out. And Wilson won the presidency with just about 42% of the popular vote, which means that 58% of the population voted against him. And yet this system made him president. So minority rule is a problem with first past the post. And it's an easy fix, as I will hopefully explain. Here's another view of the 1912 election. And let's pretend for a moment that this election were conducted using ranked choice voting, which I'm going to describe in detail shortly. But ranked choice voting allows you to rank your candidates in order of your preference. And if no person wins a majority in the first round, the person with the lowest number of votes is eliminated and the second choice votes are made. So let's pretend for a moment that this election was conducted using first past the post. It is likely that everyone that voted for the sitting president, Howard Taft, as their first choice, likely their second choice would have been Teddy Roosevelt, because he was a former Republican and a former president. They weren't going to vote socialist, and why would they vote for a Democrat? So it is likely, and of course this is speculation, that if this were to use ranked choice voting, Teddy Roosevelt would have won the election because he would have been the second choice, perhaps, of many voters. However, we don't know. That's for speculation. So let's take a look at the 1992 presidential election, which was a 3-way race between the sitting president, George H.W. Bush, the independent candidate, Ross Perot, and the Democratic candidate, the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton won the election with 43% of the popular vote. And that means that 57% of the country wanted someone else as president. And that is the problem of first past the post. What if, those that voted first for George H.W. Bush, what if their second choice was Ross Perot? Or what if the voters who voted for Ross Perot, their second choice was George H.W. Bush? The election would have come out differently, most likely. And, to my mind, this is just why first past the post is such a flawed system. Then, of course, we have the examples of 2000 and 2016. And these elections were stolen by voter ID laws, voter suppression laws, gerrymandering, everything. The whole system being dysfunctional meant that these elections didn't come out right. In both cases, the Democratic candidate won the popular vote, and in both cases, the Republican candidate was awarded the presidency. Now, in 2000, the recount that happened was overseen by the Secretary of State of Florida, Katherine Harris, who was the chair of Governor Bush's campaign in Florida. Governor Bush's brother was the governor of Florida, Jeb Bush. Once the election was over, and the recount was stopped by the Supreme Court, Bush was declared the winner and given the presidency. Every study after the election demonstrates that Al Gore should have won. So George W. Bush stole the election in the year 2000. Donald Trump and the Republicans stole it in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by more than 3 million, and yet Donald Trump ended up president. Now, this is partly due to Democratic voters staying home, thinking that Hillary would win, or not liking her, either one. But in the states that Trump won by razor-thin margins, it's clear that voter suppression laws made the difference. So this election was stolen as well. And just before we move on now, so that I can talk about proportional voting, I wanted to add this in. What happens in the event of a tie in the Electoral College? Well, under the Constitution, the election goes to the Congress. The House of Representatives elects the president, and the Senate elects the vice president. Now, what is extremely objectionable is that in this election, each state only gets one vote for president in the House. That's entirely unfair and wrong, and one of the things that we have to fix. If the House can't elect a president, then the vice president-elect will serve as acting president until one is chosen. And if neither can be elected, then the Speaker of the House becomes acting president until one of them is chosen. So we live in a very dysfunctional system. Let's talk about one way in which we could fix it. And that's by the adoption of proportional voting. Proportional voting better reflects the political makeup of any country, any constituency, any state. And it does allow for more than two parties, which is healthy for a democracy. There are many types of proportional voting. It just depends on the circumstance. I'm going to talk about several examples of them and show you how they might work. I went to a wonderful website called ballotpedia.org, and I very much suggest that you visit ballotpedia.org. It's a fantastic website. And they had a section on proportional representation, and you can go there for more information. But simply, there are three types, major types, with many subcategories. The three major types are the single transferable vote, which is also referred to as ranked choice voting, the party list system, and additional member system. So I want to start by talking about ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is on the ballot on Massachusetts this election year, 2020. And I'm very much in favor of it. So let's look at what ranked choice voting means. So here's a sample ranked choice voting ballot. And what you'll notice is, so let's pretend that this is an election for a seat in the House of Representatives. And there are 5 candidates running in my constituency, in my district. I now have 5 votes, and I will rank each of these candidates in my order of preference. My first preference, the person that I want to win the election, will be number 1. My runner-up will be number 2, and so on down the ballot. So let's pretend for a moment that our hypothetical voter has filled out their ranked choice voting ballot. They've ranked the Green Party number 1, the Center Party number 2, the SDLP number 3, the Conservative Party number 4, and then the write-in candidate as their 5th choice. So let's say that in this case, their first choice, which was the Green Party, Sarah McDaniel, she ends up earning the lowest number of votes in the first round of counting. Well, she is dropped, and everyone who voted for her as their first choice has their second choice votes cast. Now, normally under ranked choice voting, by the second or third round, someone has achieved more than 50% of the vote and the election is over. But the counting goes on until someone wins 50% or more of the vote. This is also called instant runoff voting. It's a wonderful choice, and it would solve so many of our problems. So there's a method. Here's the method. You can pause if you'd like and read about it. But it's essentially, as I said, there are rounds of counting, and when someone achieves more than 50% of the vote, the election is over and that person is declared the winner. So under ranked choice voting, and here's a chart, under ranked choice voting, in most circumstances, most voters will be represented by their first or their second choice. And that's very superior to the system that we have. It does best reflect the needs and the wants of that constituency or that district or that state. So let's look at a case where ranked choice voting in the United States, in the state of Maine, actually made a huge difference. And that was in the 2018 election. for Maine's 2nd Congressional District. And in 2016, the Republican Bruce Poliquin had won. And he expected to be reelected. But 2018 was a wave year for the Democrats. So look at this chart from that election and look at the bottom. That's the first round of voting. Poliquin won 46.33% of the vote. The Democrat won 45.5% of the vote. And then the two independent candidates split what remained. So if this were a first past the post election, Poliquin wins. Election's over. He won with less than 50% of the vote. But this was not. So we went to a second round. The two lowest vote total candidates were dropped. Their second choice votes were cast, and the Democrat won the seat. So first past the post would have denied the constituency the representative they really wanted, whereas ranked choice voting ensured that they got what they wanted. And to me, this is an obvious fix for most types of elections. And hopefully it will pass in Massachusetts. So ranked choice voting can be used in many respects in many different types of elections. It seems to me that it's best suited for president, governor, senator, generally speaking. For lower house legislative elections, there are other proportional voting methods: the party list system, the additional member system, and mixed member proportional. So let's talk first about the party list system. So, and for our hypotheticals here, we're going to pretend that we're having an election for Congress, that the House of Representatives still has 435 seats, and that we're using the party list system. So what this means is each party, the Republicans, the Democrats, the Greens, the Libertarians, they make a list of candidates. And those candidates are ranked from number 1 to number 435. Now, if the lower house had 1,200 seats, then it would be from 1 to 1,200. And if it had 200 seats, it would be from 1 to 200. And when the voter votes in what's called a closed party list system, all they can do is cast a vote for the party. In an open list system, they can vote for the party and the candidate. When the votes are counted, each party is awarded their share of seats that reflects their share of the nationwide vote. So, for example, if the Democrats won 58% of the nationwide vote in this lower house election, they would get 58% of the seats, which is 252. If the Republicans won the 32%, or I'm sorry, 42%, then they would be given 183 seats. And then each party candidates are given the seats. They just go down the list, starting from number 1. And as I said, there are two types: open party and closed party lists. And from a really wonderful site called fairvote.org, I found these illustrations, and I want to give them credit. So here in our hypothetical, this is what they might look like. On the left is a closed party list ballot that you see the names of the people who are nominated, but you can just choose the party that you want. On the right, you have the open party list ballot, where not only can you choose the party, you choose the individual candidate that you like. And that gives you a high degree of flexibility, which is why I favor it. The additional member system is one that I also really appreciate and that also can be used. And it's pretty simple. You are given two separate votes, the party vote and the candidate vote. The party vote determines how many seats the party wins in the legislature, and the candidate vote determines who wins in an individual district or constituency. And this too allows for a lot of flexibility to the voter, which I really do appreciate. What I would suggest is that you pause the video now for a moment and read this slide over, and then I'm going to go on to an example. So I'll stop talking for a moment. You can pause and then we'll go on. Okay, so if a party happens to win less direct seats than their share of the vote, then what happens is we have the addition of what are called overhang seats to make sure that each party is fairly represented based on their share of the nationwide vote. So here is an example of an additional member ballot. On the left, you have the party vote, and on the right, you have the candidate vote. And what's really, I think, terrific about this is that you can make sure that your party does well in the legislative elections by ensuring that they have a good number of seats. But maybe in your constituency, you don't like the candidate that your party is running, that you actually prefer an independent candidate. Well, you can vote for that candidate. Your party will get their share of seats in the legislature that you want them to see, but your constituency, you would prefer to see this other person be elected, and that gives you that flexibility. There is a third type called mixed member proportional, which is pretty complicated. It's used in New Zealand and a few other places, but basically you're adding a layer where some seats are won by direct election and some seats are awarded by the proportion of the overall vote. And those might be seats that represent, say, a region instead of a constituency. It's just another type of proportional voting. And as I said, New Zealand uses it, a few other places use it. It's a complicated system. I think perhaps in the United States that either additional member or party list would be appropriate along with ranked choice voting in all of the various contingencies. So why do I think we need proportional voting? Well, proportional voting better represents the electorate and it forces compromise and it allows for more than a two-party system. The system that we live in is referred to as a two-party system. It's really one party with two wings. It's the Wall Street party with a liberal wing and a conservative wing. One thing that I can tell you as a political historian, the Democratic Party is not a liberal party, it's a neoliberal party. The Republican Party is a neoliberal party. They only differ on abortion, the environment, and Obamacare. That's it. They vote for the same tax cuts. They vote for the same bad neoliberal economic policies. And the Democrats are basically paid to stop Bernie Sanders and the progressive left, not the Republicans. The Democrats are cowards and incompetents, while the Republicans have become white nationalist fascists. So we're in a bad state here, and we need more than two parties. Proportional voting would allow that, and it would force compromise, which is a good thing. So I wanted to conclude by showing you a list of 12 things that I think we could do. All of these things could be written up in one constitutional amendment. But they're simple fixes to a system that has failed. And I hope you'll join me in pushing for them. So raise the number of seats in the House of Representatives to 1,200. Make sure that representatives are elected from all states and territories, from multi-member districts. Expand the Senate and award the seats proportionally. Use ranked choice voting. Extend the term of the House of Representatives to 4 years with a limit of 4 terms. Extend the term of the Senate to 8 years with a limit of 2 terms. Extend the term of the President to 6 years with a limit of 2 non-consecutive terms. Award the winner of the nationwide popular vote 50 additional electoral votes if we don't abolish the Electoral College altogether. Move Election Day to the first Monday in May and make sure that it's a state and federal holiday. Outlaw gerrymandering and all forms of voter suppression. Ban all campaigning 48 hours before the election. No campaign ads, no nothing, no speeches, no rallies. For 48 hours, everyone gets to think about what they're going to do on Election Day. I would also institute full public financing of all campaigns and restrict the length of the campaign season to, say, 4, 5, 6 months. So these are some very easy fixes that we could do that could really make a difference in our society. So I hope you'll join me and join the members of Better Elections Now in pushing for these changes after the 2020 elections are concluded. I'm recording this on the 24th of October. It's a Saturday afternoon. I guess we'll know the outcome of the election in 10 days, 2 weeks. I'm very anxious, but I'll be happy when it's over, and I'm sure you will be too. As I said, I'm going to put the link for this presentation in the description. I have given you some reading. I've assigned you some reading. You can read these about some of the topics I've talked about. And I very much want to invite you to join us, to find us on the web, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We have lots of videos now on YouTube and more to come. We have lots of great Better Elections Now educational material there and on our Instagram account and on our website, betterelectionsnow.org. So please join us, if you will. I thank you very, very much for listening to my presentation. And please do email me anytime you'd like at betterelectionsnow@gmail.org. And thank you all very much. Please be safe.